And welcome back to our continuing coverage here on Fox Local. I'm Heather Hayes.
And I'm Casey Stiegel. Thanks for being with us this afternoon as we continue to follow the developments that are unfolding. The shooter, we can tell you, opened fire around 6:30 this morning, firing a rifle from the roof of a building near the Immigration and Customs Enforcement location, 35 and Empire Central in Dallas. The gunman fired rounds into an unmarked ICE vehicle that was transporting detainees.
And 2 of those ICE detainees were killed, a third wounded. The gunman also dead, taking his own life. Sources identify the shooter as 29-year-old Joseph Yon. The FBI says the suspect wrote anti-ICE messaging on bullets, called it a targeted attack. But Casey, there are still a lot of questions about how long the attack was planned, what was the motivation, that sort of thing.
Yeah, Joe Rothrock, the FBI special agent in charge of the Dallas field office, called this in a morning press conference a targeted attack, targeted violence, and that one bullet near the shooter had anti-ICE written on it in blue ink. The director of the FBI, Kash Patel, has also sent that information out on social media, and that is getting a lot of traction online. Alex del Carmen joined us live via Zoom. He is a PhD in criminology, and he's the associate dean and professor of the College of Liberal and Fine Arts at Tarleton State University. Hey, Alex, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being here. What is your initial reaction of the job FBI agents and the local officials have on their hands now as far as this investigation goes?
Well, you know, as typical, the FBI is doing a magnificent job in being able to try to understand the motives behind, what happened this morning and also the areas of vulnerability, right? So one of the things they're trying to identify is, how much did this person know? Did this person know the facilities, the areas really well? Did this person know somebody from inside the facility? And so all of those pieces are being put together as I speak to you right now. But my sense...
All right, we're having some audio issues there. The magic of live television.
Oh, wait. Alex, can you hear us now?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. We just had a quick bleep. Let's talk about the profiling then of this person. You said they're kind of putting all these pieces together, and I'm so curious with your background, when you turned on the news or started looking at social media this morning, what instantly comes to your mind?
Unfortunately, social media has radicalized a lot of people, and unfortunately, we're seeing more and more of these incidents throughout the nation. And I think what came to mind almost immediately was, here we go again, another shooting where people are dying left and right, and the rest of us are left to question as to why or how could this happen in our nation so frequently now that it almost seems like it's happening way too often, and we're having to explain the unexplainable more often than not.
What's a good way, Alex, to talk about this maybe with your kids? You mentioned the state of affairs this afternoon, and around the world, things are pretty tense at the moment, and kids are not immune from seeing this stuff. They're not immune to seeing these types of headlines. Any advice in terms of talking to kids about this?
I can tell you that it's really important that parents are honest with their kids, but at the same time, try to put some context into what happened, right? Meaning that these are still sporadic, random acts of violence that likely will not ever affect many of them, right? So by virtue of that, they can be reassured that as long as they do what they're supposed to do and follow directions and follow protocols, they're going to be fine and everyone's going to be safe. However, I think it's important to let the kids know that this is happening in our world, not necessarily be graphic about it, but I think for them to know that they can trust their parents in telling them the truth speaks volumes, especially when they have to have direct conversations about violence at some point in their lives.
Well, I'm curious about, the college students who you're around, because that's a whole different conversation. And 2, Alex, this is when they're formulating more of their own ideas, maybe being away from their parents for the first time. They're getting information from you and from their peers. What does that conversation look like in the classroom?
It's very tense, as you can imagine, because many kids, as you just noted, it's the first time away from home, right? They were in high school a few months ago, and now they find themselves on a college campus away from home and being removed from that immediate security that they used to have. But I think it's important to reassure them. We often do. In our criminology classes, we often reassure them that these are sporadic acts of violence, that these are not necessarily going to take place in their immediate future anytime soon. However, to be vigilant, like the rest of us in society, we cannot simply walk around and ignore what's in front of us, but a lot of it has to do with where you live, how you live, and the space that surrounds you. Unfortunately, that rule has been violated a few times in the past few months as we've seen these shootings take place in churches and places that would have otherwise been, to many of us, would have had the protection that perhaps we would have assured that we would have had some years back.
Alex, how much do you worry and how much does law enforcement worry about so-called copycat crimes? Just off the top of my head, I can't think of shooting scenarios where we have found bullets or shell casings that have been inscribed with some sort of message. And we've seen this now with the shooting of Charlie Kirk, and now here in Dallas with those anti-ICE scribblings on the bullet casings. What do you make of this? This is something relatively new, but it's popped up now twice in a few weeks.
It's relatively new, but at the same time, criminals have always left a quote-unquote signature behind their acts, right? In the past, in the context of serial killers, we've seen that they kept some of the belongings of the people that they would kill, et cetera. Nowadays, it's manifesting itself in some sort of a signature that they leave behind, some sort of a motive, an agenda, a manifesto that they leave behind either in social media or in this particular case, in the actual bullet casings that they leave behind. So it is a new normal. But it is something that seems to be going from one jurisdiction to the other and from one shooter to the other. So they learn from each other. We've done these studies in the past 20, 30 years to show that there's a pattern here. Unfortunately, when one of these takes place, a few days later, we see another one and yet another one. And then there seems to be a pause in between them, but then they seem to repeat themselves again.
Certainly not the new normal that we accept, and I know that yourself as well. Alex del Carmen, we really appreciate your time this afternoon, and thank you so much for being with us.